In today's emotionally charged world, self-preservation has evolved beyond just physical safety. It's now deeply rooted in emotional boundaries, mental wellness, and the courage to walk away from what no longer serves our peace. Emotional self-preservation is the conscious decision to prioritize our inner stability, even when it means silently cutting someone off. And let's be honest, sometimes silence speaks louder than confrontation ever could. When someone continuously drains your energy, invalidates your feelings, or makes you question your worth, your brain and body begin to feel it in tangible ways. Science has shown that chronic emotional stress impacts our nervous system. It raises cortisol levels, disrupts sleep, impacts digestion, and slowly chips away at our ability to think clearly or feel safe. So when someone chooses to cut a person off without a dramatic exit, it's not out of coldness. It's a deep survival instinct. It's the mind saying enough. It's the heart finally choosing peace over confusion. There's this idea that you have to explain yourself when you distance yourself from someone, but emotional self-preservation doesn't always come with a press release. It's often a quiet, internal decision made after too many chances were given. Too many conversations were recycled, and too much of yourself was lost trying to be understood. It's not about ghosting for convenience. It's about detaching for self-respect. Many people assume that silence is passive, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Choosing silence can be the most active form of healing. It requires strength to walk away without yelling, begging, or seeking closure. It's not about being emotionally unavailable. It's about being emotionally intelligent. It's realizing that your peace of mind matters more than proving a point or staying in a connection that constantly destabilizes you. Sometimes we stay because we're afraid of being alone or because we think we owe people endless forgiveness. But growth teaches you that love should never come at the cost of self-betrayal. When you're constantly in a relationship, romantic or platonic, where you're not seen, not heard, or consistently hurt, your soul starts to shrink. That's when emotional self-preservation becomes essential. It's the moment you stop romanticizing potential and start valuing your present well-being. And here's what's often misunderstood. Walking away doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to stop bleeding for someone who never tried to stop the cut. It's having the courage to say, I love me more. Not in a selfish way, but in a deeply human way. The kind of love that understands you can be compassionate without being a doormat, that you can forgive someone and still never let them near you again. In 2025, emotional awareness is at an all-time high. We talk about therapy, boundaries, healing, and energy protection. But real practice begins when we apply that awareness. Silently cutting someone off, when done with intention and not malice, is a declaration of self-love. It's the quiet rebellion against toxicity. It's the refusal to participate in another cycle of pain. You owe it to yourself to be the safest place you know. If someone threatens that emotional safety repeatedly, no matter how much history you share, it is not only okay to walk away, it's necessary. Your mental health, your peace, your spirit, they're not up for negotiation. So the next time you choose to go quiet, remember, you're not being rude, you're being wise, you're not abandoning anyone, you're returning to yourself. Emotional self-preservation isn't just a right, it's a responsibility, and sometimes the loudest way to say I matter is with silence. We often grow up believing that closure is something we need to get from other people, that to truly move on, we have to hear their side, get an apology, or have a final conversation where everything is laid out and neatly explained. But the truth, especially in emotionally complicated or one-sided relationships, is that closure doesn't always come with a ribbon and a reason. It's not always a gift someone gives us. More often than not, it's something we give to ourselves. Closure is an inside job. When someone hurts us, betrays us, or simply fades away without explanation, our natural instinct is to search for meaning. Our brains crave resolution. We want to know why. We replay moments, reread texts, and reanalyze conversations, hoping for clarity. But what we're really doing is trying to control something that's already out of our hands. The other person might not be able to give us the truth. They might not be honest with themselves, let alone with us. They might lack the emotional maturity, or maybe they just don't care enough to explain. That's painful, but it's also revealing. Closure then becomes about facing that reality, not waiting for their validation or understanding. It's about accepting that the story might not end with justice or apology, but it still ends. And that end doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. It can be a quiet realization in the middle of the night, a shift in your chest when you no longer feel the urge to reach out, or that calm moment when you realize you've stopped checking your phone for a message that isn't coming. Doing closure from the inside means you stop outsourcing your healing to the person who hurt you. It means you stop waiting for them to come around and make things right. You stop hoping that maybe if you had just said something differently, they'd understand. You stop believing that one more conversation will fix what was never truly mutual to begin with. Instead, you begin to trust your own perception, your own pain, and your own process. You don't need their permission to heal. One of the hardest parts of internal closure is letting go of the what-ifs. What if they change? What if they come back? What if I was the one who misunderstood? But the deeper truth is this. If someone could walk away without looking back, if they could cause damage without acknowledgement, or consistently disregard your emotional needs, then their role in your life was conditional, not unconditional. They were there for a season, not for your soul's long-term growth, and your healing cannot be dependent on someone who showed you that their emotional bandwidth wasn't big enough to hold you. Closure also isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without emotional charge. It's about being able to think about the person or situation without collapsing into confusion or grief. That takes time. That takes self-compassion. And sometimes it takes crying over the same memory 100 times until it loses its power over you. It's messy, non-linear, and often silent, but it's deeply personal and it's worth doing. The moment you decide that you are allowed to move forward without their explanation or involvement, you step into your power, you reclaim your energy, you stop spinning in circles and start walking in a new direction. You become the author of your story again, no longer waiting for someone else to write the final chapter. That, in itself, is the most powerful closure there is, because you realize you were never broken. You were just waiting to choose yourself. And when you do, you finally get to breathe. You finally get to be free. There's a pattern many people find themselves caught in returning to the same kind of relationship, the same type of person, the same emotional cycle that leaves them drained, confused, and questioning their self-worth. This repetitive experience isn't random. It's called a trauma loop, and it's deeply rooted in the subconscious mind. Breaking out of that loop is one of the hardest and most important acts of self-liberation a person can undertake. It's not about simply moving on or cutting ties. It's about rewiring the emotional blueprint that keeps pulling you back into pain that feels familiar but never safe. Trauma loops are formed when unresolved emotional wounds, often from childhood or past relationships, go unhealed. These wounds create patterns. If you were raised in an environment where love was inconsistent, conditional, or linked to approval, your nervous system might confuse unpredictability and emotional unavailability with passion or connection. As a result, you might find yourself gravitating toward partners or situations that mirror that early emotional chaos, not because you enjoy it, but because it feels like home. This is what psychologists call trauma bonding. It's not love, it's survival instinct. And it's powerful. Each time you stay in a toxic relationship, forgive the same behavior without change, or chase someone who keeps you in a cycle of highs and lows, you're reinforcing that trauma loop. Your brain and body learn to normalize emotional instability, and over time, it becomes harder to distinguish between what feels familiar and what is actually healthy. You begin to confuse anxiety with attraction, inconsistency with excitement, and silence with punishment. This is why breaking the trauma loop isn't just about willpower. It requires deep awareness and intentional healing. The first step in breaking free is recognizing the pattern. This means stepping back and asking yourself not just, why is this happening again? But what part of me thinks this is normal? And where did I first learn this emotional script? It often leads to confronting uncomfortable truths about our past, acknowledging neglected needs, and facing the pain we've buried. But awareness alone isn't enough. You have to start making different choices, even when they feel unnatural at first. Silently cutting someone off can be one of those radical choices. When you step away from someone who continuously hurts you, gaslights you, or makes you feel like you're too much or never enough, you're not just ending a relationship, you're rejecting an entire pattern. You're telling your subconscious, this is not what love looks like for me anymore. And that sends a powerful message to your nervous system. You begin to calm the fight or flight responses. You start to build a new baseline of what emotional safety feels like. It's important to understand that breaking the trauma loop won't always feel good at first. In fact, it can feel deeply uncomfortable. There's a withdrawal period, emotionally, mentally, even physically. You might miss them, you might doubt yourself, you might be tempted to go back just to feel something familiar again. That's okay, that's part of the process. But every time you choose not to respond to the text, not to chase the apology, not to reopen the wound, you're creating a new loop, one based on healing, not hurt. This journey often requires support. Therapy, journaling, meditation, or even just talking to a friend who reminds you of your worth can make a world of difference. It's not about doing it all alone. It's about being honest with yourself, being patient with the process, and not shaming yourself when you stumble. Growth is rarely a straight line. The ultimate goal isn't just to avoid toxic people, it's to become the version of yourself that no longer attracts or tolerates that energy. When you heal the wound, you stop bleeding on people who didn't cause it. And more importantly, you stop letting those who did hold power over your future. That's what it means to break the trauma loop. It's not just escape, it's evolution. It's choosing peace over patterns. And that's where true freedom begins. There's a common misconception that when someone goes silent, especially in the context of a relationship, it's meant to punish, manipulate, or guilt trip the other person. But silence, when used with intention and clarity, is not a punishment at all. It's a boundary, a deeply personal, protective measure used to create emotional safety when words no longer serve, when conversations turn into circles, or when dignity needs to be preserved without drama. In a world that often equates loudness with strength and constant communication with connection, choosing silence is a radical act of self-respect. Silence becomes necessary when communication stops being productive and starts becoming harmful. There are times when you've explained yourself over and over, laid your heart bare, asked for basic respect, and still found yourself unheard or dismissed. In those moments, repeating your needs doesn't bring clarity. It brings exhaustion. Silence, then, becomes the only language that protects your energy. It says, I've said enough, I've done enough. I will not beg to be understood anymore. Psychologically, silence is not passive. It's not avoidance. It's a boundary that signals your threshold has been reached. It's the moment you stop participating in emotional chaos. When you go quiet, you're not trying to control anyone else. You're choosing to control yourself. You're choosing to exit a dynamic that continually pulls you out of alignment with your peace. Silence is what happens when growth meets restraint. It's the refusal to be pulled back into conversations that only escalate or manipulate. Many people struggle with silence because it forces them to sit with themselves. When you stop responding, when you stop explaining, it leaves the other person alone with their actions, and that discomfort often gets misinterpreted as the silent treatment, as if silence is cruel. But cruelty is when someone disregards your boundaries, invalidates your feelings, or expects you to keep engaging in toxicity because they're uncomfortable with your distance. True silence as a boundary isn't meant to hurt someone, it's meant to protect yourself. And that's a key difference. Using silence as a boundary is especially powerful in situations where words have been weaponized. If you've ever dealt with gaslighting, emotional manipulation, or circular arguments that never resolve anything, you know how draining it is to keep defending yourself. At some point, silence becomes the only tool left to disarm dysfunction. It's the exit from an unwinnable war. It's not revenge, it's release. What silence also does is create space. Space to heal, to reflect, to remember who you are outside of the noise. That space is sacred. It's where you reconnect with your inner voice, where you begin to realize that you don't owe endless access to people just because they demand it. You are allowed to choose distance. You are allowed to not pick up the phone. You are allowed to protect your peace at all costs, because not every response deserves your energy. Not every confrontation is worth your clarity. And it's important to remember, people who truly care about you will understand your silence. Or at the very least, they will respect it. They won't force you to break your boundaries to comfort their egos. They won't accuse you of being cold or cruel for choosing your well-being. They will sit with the silence, examine their own part, and hopefully meet you with maturity when communication resumes, if it ever does. Silence used as a boundary is not the absence of love. In fact, it can be a deeply loving act toward yourself. It says, I matter, my energy is valuable, and I don't have to keep breaking myself to be heard. It's choosing peace over permission. It's maturity without explanation. It's strength without volume. In the end, silence doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've risen above. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every wound needs to be reopened. And sometimes the most powerful message you can send is the one you don't say out loud. There comes a moment, after all the talking, after all the second chances, after all the bending and shrinking, when something inside you quietly shifts. It's not loud or dramatic. It's not announced with rage or revenge. It's subtle, steady, and unmistakably powerful. That moment is the beginning of the power shift. The moment you realize you don't have to beg for respect, for love, for effort. You don't have to keep proving your worth to someone who was never ready to hold it. Instead, you can walk away, not in anger but in clarity, and that right there is where the power returns to you. There's a sting that comes with rejection, whether it's from a person, an opportunity, a job, or even a dream you held close. At first, it feels deeply personal. You start questioning your worth, your choices, and even your identity. You wonder if you weren't good enough, smart enough, attractive enough, or simply *enough*. Rejection has a way of tapping into our deepest insecurities, but what if it isn't rejection at all? What if it's redirection in disguise? What if the very no that broke your heart was the universe's way of guiding you to something better, something aligned, authentic, and meant for who you're becoming, not who you were? When something doesn't go your way, your first instinct might be to take it as a personal failure. You might dwell, replay conversations, analyze your actions, and obsess over what you could have done differently. But real growth happens when you can pause and ask, what if this wasn't supposed to work out? That simple shift in mindset can change everything. Because the truth is, not every closed door is a loss. Some are protection. Some are reroutes, and some are divine interventions you won't understand until later. It's hard to see in the moment, especially when your heart is involved. Maybe you thought that person was the one. Maybe you believed that job was your big break. Maybe you built a whole future in your mind only to watch it fall apart. The grief is real. The disappointment is valid. But that does not mean you were wrong to hope. It just means the story is unfolding differently than you expected. And that difference might be exactly what saves you from settling for less than you deserve. The thing about redirection is that it often feels like rejection because it removes something familiar. It disrupts the comfort zone, the routine, the plan, but comfort isn't always aligned with growth. And rejection forces movement. It forces you to look at what wasn't working, what you were ignoring, and what parts of yourself you may have been dimming just to fit into someone else's version of enough. Redirection pulls you out of the lie that you had to prove your worth to be loved or chosen. It brings you back to yourself, even if it has to do it through pain. Over time, when you look back, you often realize the thing that didn't work out was never really right for you. Maybe it lacked depth, respect, consistency, or truth, Maybe you were shrinking to stay in it. Maybe it was a chapter, not the book, but hindsight is kind, and that's why it's so important to not make permanent decisions from temporary pain. Just because something didn't happen how you imagined doesn't mean it wasn't part of your path. Sometimes the detour asterisk is asterisk the destination. Redirection teaches you to let go with grace. It invites you to trust that there's a bigger picture, even if you can't see it yet. It builds resilience, emotional intelligence, and deeper self-awareness. It creates space for what is truly meant for you to enter your life. And more importantly, it reminds you that your value doesn't decrease based on someone else's inability to see it. You are still whole, still worthy, still powerful, even when things don't go as planned. Eventually, you start to thank the rejections, not right away and not without processing the pain, but in time. You start to see how they taught you to stop begging for what should have been freely given, how they taught you boundaries, clarity, and self-worth, how they made room for the people, opportunities, and experiences that matched your evolution, not your desperation. So the next time you're faced with what feels like a rejection, pause, breathe, ask yourself, what if this is redirection? And then trust that maybe, just maybe, something greater is already on its way. Something that won't require you to abandon any part of yourself to receive it. There is a moment in every healing journey when everything quietly changes. It's not announced with fanfare, nor is it always easy to recognize at first. But it's there, in the calm that follows the storm, in the silence you no longer feel the need to fill, in the peace you find when you finally stop chasing people, approval, or closure. That moment is what we call the power shift. It's the internal transition from victim to survivor, from abandoned to self-anchored, from overlooked to self-validated. And though it happens quietly, its effects are profound. The power shift begins when you no longer look outside yourself for answers that can only come from within. It happens when you've begged for understanding, given all the explanations, made all the compromises, and realized that none of it changed the outcome. You come to understand that you can't talk someone into respecting you, loving you, choosing you, or treating you well. And in that realization, there's heartbreak, but also awakening. For so long, many of us are conditioned to believe that if we just do a little more, love harder, be more patient, tolerate a little longer, then maybe things will get better. Maybe the person will see our worth. Maybe the relationship will evolve. Maybe the job, the friendship, the family dynamic will shift. But maybe is a painful place to live. It keeps us tied to potential, stuck in cycles, and emotionally invested in people who benefit from our self-neglect. The power shift happens when you finally say no more. It is not rooted in anger or spite. It's not about playing cold or distant. In fact, it often comes from a place of deep love, not for them, but for yourself. You begin to realize that the real power has always been within you, the power to walk away, to protect your peace, to refuse to participate in dynamics that exhaust your soul. And when you reclaim that power, something incredible happens. You start responding differently. You start choosing differently. You stop negotiating your worth. This shift is not loud. You won't always feel fierce or fearless. In fact, the early stages are often filled with self-doubt, second-guessing, and grief. Letting go of people, patterns, and identities you've clung to for years can feel like a death of sorts. You might miss them, you might wonder if you were too harsh, but every time you choose not to go back to what broke you, you are strengthening a new version of yourself. One who doesn't beg to be seen, one who doesn't confuse pain with love, one who is finally learning to feel safe in solitude, to find freedom in boundaries, to find home within. You also begin to see people differently, not as villains or heroes, but as mirrors. Each interaction reflecting back your wounds, your growth, or your patterns. You stop taking everything so personally. The rejection isn't always about you. The betrayal isn't always a reflection of your flaws. Sometimes people show you their limits, not your lack, and when you internalize that truth, you stop letting their inability to show up make you question your worth. The power shift also brings emotional clarity. You begin to trust your intuition over someone else's explanation. You stop over-explaining your needs to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You realize that healthy love doesn't require performance. It doesn't require begging. It doesn't ask you to betray yourself in exchange for belonging. With this awareness, your standards rise, not from arrogance, but from alignment. You've seen what peace feels like, and you're no longer willing to trade it for chaos just to feel temporarily connected. What's perhaps most beautiful about this shift is that it doesn't require anyone else to change. The other person doesn't have to apologize. The job doesn't have to open back up. The situation doesn't have to be resolved. Because you've already changed, you've stepped into emotional maturity, the kind that doesn't seek revenge but release, the kind that doesn't need closure because clarity is enough, the kind that understands that walking away is not giving up, it's rising up. You become less reactive and more reflective. You stop needing to prove your point. You stop needing to win the argument. You realize that peace is better than being right. You also begin to attract differently. Because when your energy is rooted in self-worth, you're no longer available for connections built on instability or disrespect. You don't chase, you align. You don't cling, you observe. You don't demand, you decide. And the beautiful thing is, the power shift isn't a one-time event. It's a continual practice. Every time you say no to what drains you, every time you say yes to what heals you, every time you honor your intuition over someone's denial. That's the power shift in action. It's not about perfection, it's about progression, a quiet, steady unfolding of your truest self. In the end, the power shift is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the version of you who existed before the world told you to doubt your worth. It's about coming home to your own voice, your own values, your own vision. And once you make that shift, you realize that the most powerful thing you can ever do is choose yourself, again and again. Without apology, without fear, without regret. There are moments in life when doors close so abruptly they feel like a slap in the face, a breakup you didn't see coming, a job you were certain was yours slipping through your fingers, a friendship that fizzled out without explanation. In those moments, rejection stings deeply. It taps into old insecurities, old wounds, and makes us question ourselves in ways we thought we'd already healed from. We start wondering, what did I do wrong? Was I not good enough? Why didn't it work out? Rejection in its rawest form feels personal, piercing, and permanent. But the truth is, it often isn't rejection at all. It's redirection. It's life's way of saying, this isn't the path for you anymore. There's something better ahead if you're willing to let go. The pain of rejection is undeniable, but pain has a way of sharpening perspective. When we're in it, all we can see is the loss, the person who left, the opportunity that vanished, the dream that collapsed. But rejection has a hidden purpose. It interrupts patterns that are no longer serving us. It challenges attachments we've outgrown. It exposes truths we've been avoiding. And most importantly, it frees us from paths that were never truly aligned with our highest good. It's difficult to see this in the moment because we've been conditioned to equate rejection with failure. We think if I had just done more, or if I had been different, then maybe the outcome would have changed. We try to retroactively rewrite the story, but that's not how alignment works. You can't force what's not meant for you. And you shouldn't have to shrink, twist, or contort yourself to be accepted by something or someone that isn't aligned with your soul. Rejection feels like an ending, but it's often a beginning dressed in unfamiliar clothing. There is immense power in the reframe. When you stop seeing rejection as a reflection of your inadequacy and start seeing it as a redirection towards something better suited to your growth, your entire world changes. You no longer beg for closed doors to reopen. You no longer chase things that exhaust you. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That shift from victim to student is the foundation of self-worth. It's where healing begins. What we often forget is that sometimes we are being protected from the very thing we think we want. That job you didn't get, it could have drained you. That relationship you thought would last forever. It may have kept you stuck in patterns of self-betrayal, that friendship that fell apart. Maybe it no longer matched the woman you're becoming. The universe rarely takes something without giving something greater in return, though it may not come in the form you expect or in the timing you'd prefer. But if you trust the process, if you stay open, something better always emerges from the ashes of what didn't work out. Redirection also teaches us to let go with grace. It asks us to surrender our attachment to the outcome and instead trust the intention. That's not always easy. Letting go feels like losing control. But the truth is, you were never in control to begin with, not of other people's choices, not of external circumstances, not of timing. What you can control is how you respond. Will you let rejection define you or refine you? Will you let it harden you or heal you? The most powerful transformations often begin with something falling apart. It's in the breaking that the rebuilding begins. It's in the silence after the door closes that your intuition finally gets a voice. And it's in the loneliness that self-discovery takes root. Sometimes you need to be stripped of what you thought you wanted to uncover what you actually need. Redirection clears space. It creates room for new people, new opportunities, new levels of self-respect and vision. But that space only serves you if you stop filling it with regret. Eventually, you'll look back on the thing that didn't work out and say, "Thank God it didn't." You'll see how it would have limited you, distracted you, or dimmed you. You'll see how the timing wasn't right, or how the version of you that wanted it no longer exists. That perspective doesn't come immediately. It arrives slowly after the tears dry and the clarity sets in. But it does come, and when it does, you'll feel gratitude for the rejection, for the redirection, and for the quiet strength you didn't know you had. So the next time something doesn't go your way, pause. Breathe. Don't rush to fix it or label it. Don't internalize it as a flaw in your character or a failure in your worth. Instead, ask yourself, what if this is saving me? What if this is the very thing that's moving me towards something more expansive, more loving, more me? Rejection isn't the end. It's the nudge, the detour, the divine redirection toward your real path. The path where you don't have to beg to be seen. The path where your light isn't too much. The path where love feels safe, work feels purposeful, and peace feels natural. That path is waiting for you. But first, you must trust that the detour was never a delay. It was the real route all along. This shift isn't about control. It's not about playing games or withholding affection to manipulate the other person. It's about reclaiming what was always yours, your voice, your energy, your emotional safety. In unhealthy dynamics, power tends to be uneven. One person gives more, apologizes more, tries harder, and ultimately sacrifices themselves just to keep the relationship afloat. The other often holds emotional power by staying emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or indifferent. That imbalance is exhausting. It makes you feel like you're walking on eggshells, constantly chasing a connection that's never quite within reach. But the moment you choose to stop playing that role, the moment you choose yourself over the illusion of being chosen, that's the moment the dynamic collapses. When you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop trying to fix it, you remove the power their behavior once had over you. Silence becomes a statement, distance becomes a boundary, and your peace becomes non-negotiable. What's so transformative about this shift is that it often doesn't look strong on the outside. To others, it may look like you're doing nothing, but internally you're doing everything. You're retraining your nervous system to stop finding comfort in chaos. You're teaching your inner child that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. You're saying to yourself, I no longer need to be chosen by someone else to feel worthy. I choose me. This isn't about becoming cold or indifferent. In fact, it often comes from the deepest place of care and love. But this time, that love is finally being redirected inward. You begin to realize that your value doesn't decrease because someone couldn't see it. You stop seeing their inability to love you properly as a reflection of your flaws and start seeing it as a reflection of their limitations. And the truth is, once you've experienced the power shift, going back becomes almost impossible. Once you've tasted what it feels like to be grounded in your self-worth, you can't unlearn that. You may still feel moments of grief, of nostalgia, of longing, but even in those moments you'll know you made the right decision. Because for the first time in a long time, you're not waiting for someone else to make you feel whole. You're not trying to convince someone to stay. You're not handing them the blueprint to your heart and hoping they won't misuse it. You're building a new reality, one where you don't shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone, one where you're not addicted to potential, but rooted in what's real, and what's real is this: your peace is sacred. Your boundaries are valid, your intuition is trustworthy, and your silence, your distance, your decision to walk away, they are not weaknesses. They are evidence of a woman who has remembered who she is. The power shift isn't about winning. It's about no longer needing to play. It's the calm after the emotional storm. It's the decision to no longer tie your identity to someone else's inability to show up. And once you've made that decision, you become untouchable, not in a prideful way, but in a peaceful one. You're no longer waiting to be saved. You are the rescue. You are the return. You are the revolution.